The transport ship Valdris drifted through the cold void of space, its hull scarred from countless battles across the outer rim. Inside its cramped cargo bay, 8-year-old Maya-chan sat cross-legged on a metal crate, humming softly to herself while sketching in a worn notebook. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her face, and her brown eyes held a curious sparkle that seemed oddly out of place in such grim surroundings. The Zelkari pirates who had captured her 3 days ago paid her little attention now. They were too busy arguing over the massive payday waiting for them at Krathen Station. Maya had learned to stay quiet during their heated discussions, but her sharp ears caught every word of their plans. "The Apex Council will pay handsomely for this one," growled Captain Vex, his blue-scaled face twisted in a greedy smile. "A human child, young and pure. Perfect for the bonding ceremony." His first mate, a lanky creature with too many arms, nodded eagerly. "The albino wolf Corvain has been without a sacrifice for 3 cycles. The council grows impatient." Maya continued sketching, but her hand trembled slightly. She understood more than the pirates realized. Her parents had been xenobiologists, and they had taught her about many alien cultures before their research station was attacked. The bonding ceremony was something she hoped she would never encounter. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through a small porthole, Maya could see the massive bulk of Krathen Station rotating slowly against a backdrop of distant stars. The station was a monument to alien engineering, with twisted spires and organic curves that hurt to look at for too long. "Docking in 10 minutes, announced the pilot over the intercom. "Prepare the cargo." Captain Vex approached Maya's crate with heavy footsteps. His reptilian eyes studied her with cold calculation. "Time to go, little human. Try to look frightened when we present you to the council. They appreciate proper terror in their sacrifices." Maya looked up from her notebook and smiled. It was a warm, innocent smile that made the captain take an involuntary step backward. "I'm not scared," she said simply. "Should I be?" The question caught Vex off guard. In his decades of piracy, he had never encountered a captive so calm. Most species would be weeping or begging by now. Humans were supposed to be weak, emotional creatures. Yet this small child seemed almost curious about her fate. "You will be," he muttered, turning away. "You will be." The docking procedure took another hour, during which Maya finished her sketch and started a new one. This time, she drew the station as she had seen it through the porthole, adding details that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than mere observation. Strange symbols decorated the margins of her drawing, flowing script that looked almost familiar despite being completely alien. When the cargo bay doors finally opened, Maya was greeted by the sight of 6 robed figures standing in perfect formation. These were members of the Apex Council, being so ancient and powerful that even the pirates showed them proper respect. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods, but Maya could feel their attention like a physical weight. The lead figure spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Is this the offering?" "Yes, High Counselor," Vex replied, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous deference. "A human child, exactly as requested. 8 years of age, no genetic modifications, completely untouched by the war." The counselor glided forward, moving without seeming to take steps. Maya watched with interest as the figure leaned down to examine her. She could see nothing within the hood's shadow, but she sensed vast intelligence studying her every detail. "Curious," the counselor murmured. "She shows no fear. Does she understand what awaits her?" "I understand," Maya said before anyone else could answer. Her voice was clear and strong in the echoing bay. "You want to feed me to your wolf so he'll be stronger. But I don't think that's what's really going to happen." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled aliens. Even the pirates looked stunned. Children, especially human children, were not supposed to speak so boldly to the Apex Council. The counselor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. "And what do you believe will happen, young one?" Maya closed her notebook and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "I think your wolf is lonely. And I think he's been waiting for a friend, not a meal." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Captain Vex made a strangled noise, clearly terrified that his valuable cargo was about to be destroyed for insolence. But the counselor simply stood straighter, considering her words. "The child will be taken to the preparation chambers," he announced finally. "The bonding ceremony will proceed as scheduled." As the council members turned to leave, Maya heard one of them whisper to another, "The wolf prophet spoke of a small guardian who would come from beyond the void. Could this be?" The response was too quiet to catch, but Maya filed the information away. Her parents had taught her that knowledge was the most powerful tool any explorer could possess, and she was definitely exploring now, even if not by choice. The preparation chambers turned out to be a series of crystalline rooms deep within the station's core. Maya was given quarters that were surprisingly comfortable, with soft furnishings and a window that looked out into space. A steady stream of servants brought her food and clean clothes, all while maintaining the sort of respectful distance usually reserved for dangerous predators. Maya ate the alien fruits they brought her and found them surprisingly sweet. She tried on the ceremonial robes they provided, noting their fine craftsmanship and the strange symbols embroidered along the hems. The symbols matched some of the ones she had drawn earlier, which she found interesting but not entirely surprising. On her second day in the chambers, Maya received her first visitor. The being who entered her room was unlike anything she had seen before, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift between blue and silver depending on the light. Forearms moved in precise coordination as the creature arranged tea service on a low table. "I am Keeper Zan," the being said in accented but clear standard. "I have been appointed to ensure your comfort during your final days." "Thank you," Maya said politely. "The room is very nice. Is the wolf really albino?" Zan's 4 hands paused in their work. "You wish to know about Corvain? I'm curious about him. My parents always said that understanding something makes it less frightening." The keeper settled into a chair across from Maya, studying her with large, luminous eyes. "Corvain is the last of his kind. The apex wolves were bred centuries ago to serve as living weapons, but the wars they were created for ended long ago. Now only Corvain remains, growing older and more powerful with each passing year." Maya sipped her tea, which tasted like cinnamon and starlight. "That sounds lonely." "Perhaps. But loneliness is not a concept we typically associate with apex wolves. They are creatures of pure instinct and hunger." "Everything gets lonely," Maya said with the sort of certainty that only children possess. "Even wolves. Even aliens. Even humans who are very far from home." Zan was quiet for a long time after that, but Maya could see the keeper watching her with new interest. When the visit ended, Zan lingered at the door. "Child," the keeper said quietly, "if there were another path available to you, would you take it?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I think the path I'm on is the right one. I just don't think it leads where everyone expects it to." That night, Maya dreamed of running through endless forests under alien stars. In her dream, she was not alone. A massive white shape ran beside her, matching her pace perfectly despite the obvious difference in their sizes. When she woke, she could still feel phantom wind in her hair and the echo of paws thundering against forest floor. The final day arrived with little ceremony. Maya was dressed in the ceremonial robes and led through the station's winding corridors by a procession of council members. They passed through sections of the station she had not seen before, ancient chambers filled with artifacts from dozens of extinct civilizations, laboratories where impossible experiments continued their work, and, finally, the great arena where the bonding ceremony would take place. The arena was vast enough to hold a small city, its floor covered in what looked like silver sand but felt like powdered starlight under Maya's bare feet. Thousands of aliens filled the tiered seats, representing species from across the galaxy. The air hummed with anticipation and barely contained power. At the center of the arena stood a raised platform surrounded by glowing symbols that hurt to look at directly. The symbols pulsed with their own light, creating patterns that seemed to tell stories older than recorded history. "Behold," announced the High Counselor, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the arena, "we bring offering to the apex wolf Corvain, last of his noble line. Let the ancient compact be fulfilled. Let power flow through blood and bone." A massive gate on the far side of the arena began to rise with the grinding of metal against stone. Maya felt every eye in the arena turn toward the dark opening, felt the collective intake of breath as something stirred in the shadows beyond. The first thing she saw was the eyes, glowing amber orbs that seemed to hold the light of dying stars. Then came the rest of him, padding into the arena with fluid grace that made the ground tremble beneath his paws. Corvain was enormous, easily the size of a shuttlecraft, with fur so white it seemed to glow with inner light. Ancient scars crisscrossed his hide, telling stories of battles fought in wars that had ended before Maya's species had learned to make fire. The crowd fell silent as the great wolf approached the platform. His massive head turned to study the assembled aliens with obvious intelligence, and Maya realized that this was no mere beast. This was a being of power and age that defied understanding. When those amber eyes finally settled on her, Maya felt a jolt of recognition that went deeper than thought. She had been right about the loneliness. It radiated from Corvain like heat from a star, a profound isolation that spoke of centuries spent in this arena, performing for crowds that saw him as nothing more than a magnificent predator. The High Counselor raised his arms, beginning an incantation in a language that predated most of the species present. The symbols on the platform flared brighter, and Maya felt power gathering in the air like the promise of storm. But, instead of fear, she felt only sadness for the great wolf who stood before her. Without thinking, she stepped forward off the platform and walked across the silver sand toward him. Gasps echoed through the arena. The incantation faltered as the High Counselor stared in shock. No sacrifice had ever approached the wolf willingly. They were supposed to wait on the platform for the ceremony to reach its climax. Maya stopped just out of reach of Corvain's massive jaws and looked up into those ancient eyes. "Hello," she said simply. "I'm Maya. I think we're supposed to be friends." For a moment that stretched into eternity, the arena held its collective breath. The great wolf lowered his massive head until it was level with Maya's, studying her with an intensity that would have terrified grown warriors. Then, Corvain did something that no one in the arena had ever seen before. He lowered himself to the ground in a gesture that could only be described as a bow. The silence in the arena was so complete that Maya could hear her own heartbeat. Thousands of alien spectators sat frozen in disbelief as the massive white wolf remained bowed before the small human child. The High Counselor's incantation died on his lips, ancient words of power scattered like leaves in wind. Maya reached out slowly and placed her small hand on Corvain's enormous muzzle. His fur was softer than she had expected, like touching a cloud made solid. The moment their skin made contact, something extraordinary happened. A wave of pure energy rippled outward from where they touched, washing over the arena in circles of silver light. The ancient symbols carved into the platform began to shift and rearrange themselves, forming new patterns that no scholar present could recognize. The very air seemed to sing with harmonies that had not been heard since the galaxy was young. "Impossible," whispered the High Counselor, his voice barely audible over the growing resonance. "The wolf bonds are forged through sacrifice, through the consumption of life force. This is something else entirely." Keeper Zan, who had been watching from the council's private viewing area, felt tears streaming down their face. In all their centuries of service, they had never witnessed anything so beautiful. The child and the wolf were not bound by ancient magic or forced compact. They were choosing each other freely, and that choice was rewriting the very foundations of power within the arena. Maya felt Corvain's consciousness brush against hers, tentative at first, then, with growing confidence. His mind was vast and complex, filled with memories spanning centuries. She saw glimpses of his youth, when the apex wolves ran in great packs across worlds that no longer existed. She felt his grief for his fallen packmates, his rage at being reduced to a spectacle, and, beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it nearly broke her heart. But she also felt something else, hope. For the first time in decades, Corvain was not alone in his mind. The small human child was there with him, her presence warm and bright like a tiny sun in the darkness of his isolation. Through their connection, Maya shared her own memories. Corvain experienced the wonder of human childhood, the love of parents who taught their daughter that every living being deserved respect and understanding. He felt her courage in the face of capture, her curiosity about the universe around her, and her absolute certainty that friendship was always possible, even in the darkest circumstances. The energy radiating from their bond continued to intensify, and cracks began to appear in the arena's ancient stonework. The alien spectators shifted nervously as their seats trembled beneath them. Some began to flee, terrified by forces they could not comprehend. "The binding must be severed," declared another council member, panic creeping into their normally controlled voice. "The child is corrupting the ceremony. She must be destroyed before she damages the wolf beyond repair." But, as the council member reached for the ceremonial blade that would end Maya's life, Corvain's head snapped up with lightning speed. His amber eyes blazed with protective fury, and a growl rumbled from his throat that made the arena's very foundations shake. The threat was clear: anyone who tried to harm the child would face the full wrath of an apex wolf. The council member stumbled backward, the blade clattering to the platform. In all the centuries of ceremonies, Corvain had never shown aggression toward the council. He had been a reluctant but obedient participant in their rituals. Now, for the first time, he was acting of his own will. Maya turned to face the assembled council, her hands still resting on Corvain's massive head. The wolf rose to his feet beside her, his bulk casting her in shadow but somehow making her seem more imposing rather than smaller. "The ceremony is over," she announced, her young voice carrying clearly through the arena. "Corvain doesn't want to hurt anyone anymore. And neither do I." "You understand nothing, child," the High Counselor replied, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "The wolf bonds have maintained peace in this sector for 3 centuries. Without the power they provide, our enemies will see weakness and attack." Maya tilted her head, considering his words. Through her connection with Corvain, she could see the truth of the political situation. The Apex Council ruled through fear, using the wolf's legendary power to keep dozens of aggressive species in line. But she could also see how hollow that power had become, how much it depended on ritual and reputation rather than actual strength. "You're afraid," she said, and the simple observation hit the council like a physical blow. "You've been afraid for so long that you forgot there might be another way." "What would you know of fear?" demanded another council member. "You are a child of a weak species that barely controls a single star system. What could humanity possibly teach us about power?" Maya smiled at that, and something in her expression made several council members take involuntary steps backward. "We don't know much about power," she admitted. "But we know a lot about friendship. And friends are stronger together than either one could be alone." To demonstrate her point, Maya projected a simple image through her bond with Corvain, the two of them standing together, not as predator and prey, but as partners. The image rippled outward through the arena, carrying with it a sense of possibility that touched every mind present. The reaction was immediate and electric. Alien species who had been enemies for generations suddenly saw each other not as threats to be contained, but as potential allies. The rigid hierarchy that had kept the sector stable through fear began to crack under the weight of new understanding. In the viewing stands, a delegation of the normally warlike Crothery began speaking in hushed tones with their traditional enemies, the peaceful Ilani. Neither species could fully explain the change that had come over them, but both recognized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Keeper Zan approached the platform cautiously, their forearms spread in a gesture of peaceful intent. "Young Maya," they said softly, "do you understand what you have done?" Maya looked up at the keeper, then, around the arena at the thousands of aliens who were seeing each other with new eyes. Through Corvain's enhanced senses, she could feel the change spreading beyond the arena, carried by quantum entanglement to every corner of the station. "I made a friend," she said simply. "Everything else just happened." The High Counselor stepped forward, his ancient robes rustling with barely contained power. "The ritual must be completed. The old ways cannot simply be abandoned because a child wishes it so. There are forces at work here that you cannot comprehend." But, before he could continue, another voice cut through the arena's charged atmosphere. "Perhaps," it said, "it is time for new ways." All eyes turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows at the arena's edge. It was clearly alien, but unlike any species present. Tall and ethereal, with skin that seemed to be made of living starlight, the being moved with grace that spoke of immense age and wisdom. The High Counselor's entire body went rigid with shock. "Honored ancestor," he whispered, dropping to one knee. "You have not walked among us for 1,000 years." The Starborn, for that was what the ancient being was called, glided across the arena floor without seeming to touch the ground. Their presence made the very air shimmer with possibilities beyond mortal understanding. "I have watched this ceremony for centuries," the ancestor said, their voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies most species could not hear. "I have seen power flow from death to life, strength built upon sacrifice and fear. But, today, I witnessed something I thought lost forever, the birth of true symbiosis." They stopped before Maya and Corvain, studying the pair with eyes that held the light of distant galaxies. "Child of Earth, you have shown us what we forgot in our pursuit of control. Power shared is not power diminished, but power multiplied." Maya felt a flutter of nervousness for the first time since entering the arena. The Starborn's presence was overwhelming, like standing before a living star. But Corvain's steady warmth in her mind gave her courage. "I didn't mean to break anything important," she said carefully. "I just wanted to help Corvain not be lonely anymore." The ancestor's expression, if it could be called an expression on features made of living light, seemed to soften. "You have broken nothing, young one. You have repaired something that was damaged long before you were born. They turned to address the assembled council. The old compact is ended. The rituals of sacrifice will cease. But, the bonds of partnership. They gestured toward Maya and Corvain. These may continue, for those who choose them freely. The arena erupted in chaos as various factions tried to process this radical change. Some aliens cheered, finally, free from the fear that had governed their lives for centuries. Others protested, terrified of what would happen without the iron control of the council. But, through it all, Maya and Corvain remained at the center of the storm, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. The connection between them was no longer just mental, it was beginning to affect them physically as well. Maya felt her senses expanding, enhanced by Corvain's predatory awareness. She could hear conversations happening hundreds of meters away, could smell the fear and hope that filled the air like competing perfumes. More surprisingly, she felt herself growing stronger, her small frame somehow able to support energies that would have overwhelmed her just hours before. Corvain, meanwhile, was experiencing something he had never known, the complex emotions and rapid-fire thoughts of a human child. Through Maya's perspective, he saw the arena not as a prison, but as a place full of interesting beings with their own stories and struggles. The bloodthirsty hunger that had driven him for centuries was replaced by curiosity and, amazingly, compassion. As the chaos in the arena continued to swirl around them, Maya made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She climbed onto Corvain's back, settling herself between his shoulder blades like she belonged there. The great wolf rose to his full height, carrying his small passenger with obvious pride. Together, they began to walk toward the arena's main exit, neither asking permission nor waiting for dismissal. "Where are you going?" called the High Counselor, his voice sharp with anxiety. Maya looked back over her shoulder, her eyes bright with possibility. "To see what's out there," she replied. "Corvain has been stuck in this arena for decades. It's time for him to see the universe again." The Starborn ancestor watched them go with something that might have been approval. "So begins a new age," they murmured to themselves. "May the cosmos guide their steps wisely." As Maya and Corvain disappeared through the arena's archway, the energy patterns they had created began to spread throughout the station's quantum field. The change they had sparked was only beginning, and its effects would soon reach far beyond the confines of Krathen Station. But, for now, they were simply a girl and her wolf, setting out to explore the wonders of a universe that suddenly seemed full of friendship and possibility. 3 weeks after the ceremony that changed everything, Maya and Corvain had become legends across 12 star systems. News of their unprecedented bond traveled faster than light through quantum communication networks, sparking hope in some quarters and terror in others. They currently stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Wandering Star, watching the blue-green marble of Kepler's hope slowly rotate beneath them. The planet was their first official destination, though Maya suspected it would not be their last. The surface scans show 3 distinct civilizations, reported Captain Torres, the grizzled human spacer who had volunteered to transport them after hearing their story. 2 of them have been at war for over a century. The third keeps trying to mediate, but nobody listens to them because they're pacifists. Maya nodded thoughtfully, scratching behind Corvain's ears. The great wolf had grown comfortable with the ship's cramped quarters, though he still preferred spending time in the cargo bay where he had room to properly stretch. Their bond had deepened considerably during the journey, and she could now access his memories almost as easily as her own. "What are they fighting about?" she asked. "Mining rights to the planet's core," Torres replied. "The Vekari claim their ancestors were there first. The Zeltani say they have better technology so they deserve it more. Both sides keep escalating, and now they're developing weapons that could crack the planet in half." Through her enhanced senses, Maya could feel the anguish radiating from the planet below. 3 billion beings lived on Kepler's hope, and most of them just wanted the fighting to stop. But fear and pride had locked their leaders into a cycle of violence that seemed impossible to break. "The peacekeepers want to meet with us," Torres continued. "They're called the Solani. Strange folk, they communicate through bioelectric fields rather than sound. But they've been sending messages to every diplomatic vessel that passes through, begging for help." Maya closed her eyes and extended her consciousness downward, using abilities that still surprised her. Through Corvain's enhancement of her natural empathy, she could sense the emotional landscape of the planet like a 3-dimensional map. The Vekari settlements blazed with anger and determination. The Zeltani territories pulsed with similar fury mixed with technological arrogance. But, scattered throughout both regions were pockets of desperate hope, individuals from both species who dreamed of peace but felt powerless to achieve it. The Solani territories were different. Their emotions flowed in complex harmonies, like a vast orchestra playing a song of longing and compassion. They truly did want to help everyone, but their pacifist nature made them seem weak to the warring factions. We should go down, Maya decided. All three groups need to remember that they're neighbors, not enemies. Corvain rumbled his agreement, the sound reverberating through the ship's hull. His predatory instincts were screaming warnings about entering a war zone, but his bond with Maya had taught him that some risks were worth taking. The shuttle ride to the surface gave Maya her first close look at a world torn by conflict. Orbital defense stations hung in space like metal vultures, their weapon arrays trained on the planet below. The atmosphere itself showed signs of industrial warfare, chemical clouds that spoke of battles fought with weapons designed to poison entire ecosystems. They landed at the Solani capital, a city that seemed to grow directly from the planet's surface rather than being built upon it. Crystalline spires twisted skyward like living trees, their surfaces pulsing with the soft bioelectric signatures that served as the Solani's primary language. Maya felt the presence of thousands of minds as they disembarked from the shuttle. The Solani were humanoid but delicate, with translucent skin that revealed the intricate network of bioelectric channels beneath. When they moved, patterns of light flowed along their bodies like thoughts made visible. The delegation that met them was led by a tall Solani whose bioelectric patterns were more complex than the others. Through Corvain's enhanced senses, Maya could interpret the light speech as easily as spoken words. "Welcome, Bridge Builder," the leader said, their skin flickering with patterns of deep respect. "I am Prime Harmony Zephy's. We have hoped for your coming since the quantum waves first brought US news of the Great Bonding." Maya bowed politely, having learned diplomatic protocol during their journey. "Thank you for inviting us. We want to help if we can." Zephy's pattern shifted to indicate complex emotion, hope mixed with desperation and ancient sadness. "The war consumes everything. Each day brings new violence, new hatred. The Vekri and Zeltani were once trading partners. Now they speak only through weapons fire." As they walked through the city, Maya was struck by its beauty. The Solani had achieved perfect harmony with their environment, their technology so advanced that it was indistinguishable from nature. Gardens floated in mid-air, tended by creatures that might have been plants or animals or something altogether different. The very air hummed with life and possibility. But, underneath the beauty, she could sense the strain. The Solani were empaths, and the emotional violence raging across their world was slowly killing them. Many had retreated into deep meditation chambers where they could block out the hatred poisoning their planet's psychic environment. "Show us the war zones," Maya requested. "We need to understand what's really driving the conflict." Zephy's patterns flickered with concern. "It is dangerous for one so young. The battlefields are poisoned by both chemicals and hatred." "We'll be careful," Maya promised, and Corvain's presence beside her made the words seem less absurd. The great wolf had proven surprisingly effective at protecting his small companion, his size and reputation causing even hardened warriors to think twice about aggressive action. They flew to the border between Vekri and Zeltani territories in a bioship that moved like a living creature through the poisoned air. Below them stretched a wasteland that had once been the planet's most fertile region. Craters marked the locations of battles fought with increasingly desperate weapons, and the very ground seemed to weep with contamination. Maya extended her consciousness downward and immediately recoiled from the intensity of emotion saturating the battlefield. Centuries of accumulated hatred had soaked into the soil itself, creating a psychic wound that fed on itself and grew stronger with each new atrocity. But, within that maelstrom of anger, she sensed something else: grief. Both sides were mourning losses that went back generations. The original dispute over mining rights had long since been forgotten, replaced by a cycle of revenge that neither side knew how to escape. "They're not really fighting over the mines anymore," Maya realized aloud. "They're fighting because they've forgotten how to stop." Corvain's mental voice was grim as it touched her thoughts. "Pain breeds pain. The cycle will continue until something breaks it from outside." As if summoned by their conversation, explosions began blooming in the distance. Another skirmish was beginning, this one apparently triggered by a Zeltani patrol that had strayed too close to a Vekri outpost. Within minutes, both sides were calling in reinforcements and unleashing weapons that turned the air itself into fire. "Take us down," Maya decided suddenly. Zephy's bioelectric patterns blazed with alarm.
Impossible. They will shoot down anything that approaches the battle zone.
Not if we go fast enough, Corvain's mental voice suggested.
And, not if we give them something more important to think about.
Maya felt a moment of vertigo as she realized what her companion was proposing. The plan was insane, dangerous, and completely without precedent. It was also exactly what the situation required.
Land us at the edge of the battlefield, she told Zephyrs.
As close as you can get without drawing fire. The bioship descended through clouds of toxic smoke, its living hull filtering out the worst of the chemical contamination. They touched down on a ridge overlooking the main battle, where both armies were dug in behind energy shields and automated defense systems. Maya climbed onto Corvain's back, settling into the groove between his shoulder blades that had become as familiar as her own bedroom.
The great wolf rose to his full height, his white fur seeming to glow against the dark landscape.
"Ready?" she asked, though she could feel his answer through their bond. Together, they leaped from the ridge and landed in the valley below with earth-shaking force. The impact sent shockwaves through both battle lines, causing weapons to misfire and soldiers to stumble. Suddenly, every eye on the battlefield was focused on the massive white wolf and the small human child riding on his back. For a moment, the shooting stopped. Warriors from both sides stared in disbelief at the figures standing calmly in no man's land between their forces. Maya could feel their confusion rippling through the quantum field. Who were these strangers, and what were they doing in the middle of a war? Maya stood up on Corvain's back, her small form silhouetted against the burning sky. When she spoke, her voice was amplified by abilities she was only beginning to understand, carrying clearly across the battlefield. "My name is Maya Chen," she called out.
"This is my friend Corvain. We've come to ask you a question."
A Valkyrie commander emerged from behind his energy shield, his scaled hide scarred by decades of warfare.
"What question could a human child possibly have for us?"
Maya looked directly at him, then at the Zeltani positions across the valley.
"Do any of you remember what you're really fighting for?"
The question hung in the air like a challenge.
Maya could feel the ripple of uncertainty it created as soldiers on both sides tried to formulate answers. The original mining dispute was ancient history.
The revenge cycles had gone on so long that many combatants had forgotten the specific grievances that started them. "We fight because they attacked us," called out a Zeltani officer, her cybernetic implants glinting in the firelight. "And we fight because they would steal what is ours," replied the Valkyrie commander.
Maya nodded thoughtfully. But what if there was enough for everyone? What if fighting wasn't the only choice?
Through her bond with Corvain, she projected an image that suddenly filled every mind on the battlefield. They saw Kepler's hope as it could be, not divided by arbitrary borders, but unified in purpose. Valkyrie engineering expertise combined with Zeltani technology and Solani wisdom to unlock the planet's resources without destroying its environment. The vision showed cities rising that honored all three cultures, space elevators that could lift unlimited cargo without scarring the planet's surface, and vast parks where children of all three species played together under alien suns. But, more than the specific details, the image carried an emotional resonance that cut through decades of programmed hatred. For the first time in generations, warriors on both sides felt something other than anger and fear. They felt hope. The silence stretched on as the vision faded. Maya could sense the internal struggle happening in hundreds of minds as ingrained reflexes warred with new possibilities. Some soldiers were already lowering their weapons, unable to reconcile their hatred with the beauty they had just experienced.
Then, a shot rang out from the Zeltani lines.
A hardline officer, terrified by the change he felt in his troops, had fired a plasma bolt directly at Maya.
The bolt never reached its target.
Corvain moved with liquid speed, placing himself between the weapon and his rider. The plasma splashed harmlessly against his enhanced hide, but the act of aggression triggered something primal in the great wolf. His roar shook the very foundations of the battlefield. Ancient power that had been held in check by Maya's gentle influence suddenly blazed forth like a star-going nova. Every weapon on the battlefield went silent, not through choice but because the electromagnetic pulse of Corvain's rage had fried their delicate systems. In the sudden quiet, Maya's voice carried with perfect clarity.
"Violence is easy," she said simply. "Anyone can destroy things.
But it takes real courage to build something better." The Valkyrie commander was the first to step forward, his weapon forgotten in the sand. "Child," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "if what you showed us is possible, if there is truly another way."
"There is," Maya replied. But only if you choose it together. One by one, warriors from both sides began to emerge from their fortifications. They approached the center of the battlefield cautiously, decades of mistrust warring with newfound hope. But Maya and Corvain's presence seemed to create a bubble of peace around them, a space where violence was not just discouraged but somehow impossible. When the first Thekri soldier shook hands with his Zeltani counterpart, the quantum resonance of the gesture rippled outward across the planet. In command centers and capitals, leaders felt an inexplicable urge to pick up communication devices they hadn't used in years and call their enemies to discuss possibilities instead of ultimatums. The change had begun, but Maya knew it was only the first step. True peace would take time to build, trust to cultivate, and constant vigilance to maintain. But, for the first time in over a century, the people of Kepler's Hope could imagine a future without war. As the sun set over the transformed battlefield, Maya and Corvain prepared to continue their journey. There were other worlds that needed healing, other conflicts that required fresh perspective. But, tonight, they would rest knowing that they had given an entire planet the gift of possibility. The universe, it seemed, was full of beings who had forgotten how to be friends. Maya and Corvain had appointed themselves to remind everyone they met that friendship was always possible, even in the darkest of circumstances. 6 months had passed since Maya and Corvain began their journey across the galaxy, and their reputation had grown beyond anything either of them had imagined. They were known by dozens of names now, the Bridge Builder and her Wolf, the Peacebringers, the Harmony Heralds. But Maya still preferred to think of them simply as friends exploring the universe together. Their current destination was perhaps their most challenging yet, the Shattered Worlds, a collection of asteroid habitats where the most violent species in the galaxy had been exiled after their homeworlds were destroyed in ancient wars. It was a place where hope had died long ago, replaced by endless cycles of revenge and survival. "Are you certain about this?" asked Admiral Kestrel, the stern-faced human commander whose fleet was escorting them to the edge of the danger zone. "The outcasts don't negotiate. They don't even communicate except to issue threats. Some of them have been fighting the same battles for 1,000 years." Maya stood at the bridge viewport, watching the asteroid field grow larger as they approached. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the rage and despair emanating from the scattered habitats like heat from dying stars. These were beings who had lost everything, their homes, their families, their futures, and had nothing left but hatred. "They're not really outcasts," she said quietly. "They're refugees who have been angry for so long they've forgotten how to be anything else." Corvain's mental voice carried deep sadness as he shared her perspective. Through their bond, he could feel the echoes of his own past in these broken warriors. He too had been shaped by loss and rage, trapped in cycles of violence that seemed impossible to escape. "The Galactic Council has tried to deal with them for centuries," Admiral Kestrel continued. "Military action just makes them more violent. Economic pressure doesn't work on beings who have nothing to lose. And every diplomatic mission has ended with the ambassadors barely escaping with their lives." Maya turned from the viewport, her young face serious beyond her years. "Then, maybe it's time to try something different." The plan they had developed was characteristically simple and absolutely insane. Instead of approaching with a fleet or sending formal diplomatic messages, Maya and Corvain would enter the Shattered Worlds alone and unarmed. They would offer no threats, make no demands, and present no formal proposals. They would simply be present, available to talk with anyone who chose to listen. Admiral Kestrel's protests were immediate and vehement, but Maya had learned to use her connection to Corvain to project calm confidence that was difficult to argue with. The Great Wolf's reputation had grown considerably during their travels, and few commanders were willing to directly oppose an apex wolf, even one who seemed devoted to peace rather than war. The shuttle that carried them into the asteroid field was a simple civilian craft, deliberately chosen to appear non-threatening. Maya had insisted on piloting it herself, her enhanced reflexes and Corvain's predatory instincts combining to navigate the dangerous debris field with surprising skill. The first habitat they encountered was called Vendetta Station, a massive hollow asteroid where the survivors of the Morgeth Empire had built a fortress city. The Morgeth had once controlled 17 star systems before their neighbors united to destroy them for their aggressive expansion policies. Now fewer than 1 million of them remained, their entire civilization reduced to planning elaborate revenge schemes they lacked the power to execute. Maya brought their shuttle to a gentle landing in the station's public docking bay, though public was a relative term in a place where visitors were usually shot on sight. The few Morgeth who witnessed their arrival scattered like startled insects, clearly expecting some kind of trap. "Welcome to Vendetta Station," came a harsh voice over the communication system. "State your business or prepare to be destroyed." "My name is Maya," she replied calmly. "This is Corvain. We've come to listen." The communication channel was silent for several long minutes. Maya could imagine the confusion in the station's command center as hardened warriors tried to process such an unusual statement. Finally, the voice returned, even more suspicious than before. "Listen to what?" "To whatever you want to tell us," Maya said. "We're not here to judge or negotiate or threaten. We're just here." Another long pause, then, "You may disembark. But any aggressive action will result in immediate vaporization." Maya and Corvain emerged from their shuttle to find themselves in a docking bay that looked like a military fortification. Weapon emplacements were built into every surface, and automated defense systems tracked their movement with obvious hostility. The air itself felt thick with paranoia and barely contained violence. A delegation of Morgoth warriors approached them with weapons drawn but not quite aimed. Their leader was an elderly female whose cybernetic implants suggested she was a veteran of the wars that had destroyed her people. Her remaining natural eye studied Maya and Corvain with cold calculation. "I am War Speaker Velterra," she announced. "I speak for the Vengeance Council of the Morgoth Remnant. You claim to be here to listen. Very well. Listen to this: we will have satisfaction for the genocide committed against our people. We will reclaim our lost territories and make our enemies pay for their crimes. This is not negotiable." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds very painful. Carrying that much anger for so long must be exhausting." The unexpected response clearly caught Velterra off guard. She had been prepared for threats, offers, or diplomatic platitudes. Simple empathy was not something she had anticipated. "Pain," she repeated, her voice uncertain. "You speak of pain to warriors who have lost everything?" "Yes," Maya said simply. "Because I can feel it. The anger is real, but underneath it is grief so deep it's like a black hole in your hearts. You're not really angry at your enemies anymore. You're angry at the universe for taking away everyone and everything you loved." Through her bond with Corvain, Maya projected not judgment but understanding. She shared glimpses of her own losses: parents killed by raiders, a home destroyed, a future stolen by forces beyond her control. But she also shared what had come after: the choice to find meaning in connection rather than revenge. Velterra's cybernetic eye flickered as her enhanced emotional regulators struggled to process the unexpected input. Around her, the other warriors shifted uncomfortably as they felt their own buried grief rising to the surface. "You understand nothing," Velterra said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You are a child who has never seen war." "I've seen what war leaves behind," Maya replied gently. "I've seen the scars it carves into people's souls. But I've also seen those scars heal when people stop picking at them and start helping each other instead." She gestured to Corvain, who lowered himself to lie on the docking bay floor in a gesture of peaceful intent. Corvain was built for war. He was bred to kill and destroy and conquer. But when we met, we both chose something different. We chose each other. The simple statement rippled through the assembled warriors like a shock wave. Many of them had spent centuries focused on their hatred for their enemies, but it had been almost as long since any of them had chosen to care about someone new. Over the following hours, Maya and Corvain moved through Vendetta Station like stones thrown into still water, their presence creating ripples that spread outward in ways both seen and unseen. They listened to war stories and tales of loss, offering no solutions but simply acknowledging the pain that had shaped these broken people. They visited the Memorial Hall, where the names of 17 billion dead Morgoth were inscribed on walls that stretched beyond sight. Maya stood before those endless lists and wept, not with pity, but with genuine grief for lives cut short and dreams destroyed. Her tears seemed to unlock something in the hardened warriors who watched her, and soon they too were weeping for the first time in decades. In the engineering sections, they met Morgoth who had devoted their lives to building weapons of revenge they would never be able to use. Maya listened to their technical explanations and asked thoughtful questions, but what impressed the engineers most was her genuine interest in their skill and creativity rather than the destructive potential of their work. By the end of their first day on Vendetta Station, word of the strange visitors had spread throughout the habitat. Crowds began to gather wherever Maya and Corvain went, not to threaten or challenge, but simply to see these beings who somehow managed to care about people everyone else had written off as monsters. The real breakthrough came when Maya asked Valterra to show her the children's quarters. The war speaker's expression went through several rapid changes before settling on something that might have been hope.
"We have few children," she admitted.
"Barely 300 in the entire station.
Most were born here and have never seen a world with open skies."
The children's section was a revelation. Here, away from the eyes of the adult warriors, Maya found something that had not existed elsewhere in the station: joy.
The young Morgoth played games and told stories and dreamed of futures that had nothing to do with revenge or war. They had grown up surrounded by hatred, but they had not yet learned to make it the center of their existence.
When Maya and Corvain entered the children's common area, the reaction was immediate and electric.
The young ones crowded around the great white wolf with delighted squeals, completely unafraid of his legendary reputation. Corvain bore their attention with patient grace, allowing them to climb on his back and tug at his ears while their elders watched in stunned amazement. "Tell us about the outside," demanded a young girl whose purple skin marked her as pure Morgoth.
"Is it true there are worlds where you can see the sky without walls?"
Maya spent the next several hours describing the wonders they had seen in their travels: crystal cities that sang in harmonious chords, forests that grew in zero gravity, ocean worlds where the fish were made of living light.
The children listened with wide-eyed fascination, their imaginations kindling possibilities their parents had long since abandoned.
But it was what happened next that changed everything. One of the children, a boy of perhaps 6 standard years, looked directly at Maya with eyes that seemed far too old for his face.
"Could we come with you?" he asked quietly. "Just to see what's out there?" The question hit the assembled adults like a physical blow.
For centuries, the Morgoth had defined themselves by their hatred of the outside universe.
The possibility that their children might want to explore rather than destroy that universe challenged the very foundations of their identity.
Valterra stepped forward, her mechanical components whirring with agitation. "The children are safe here. Outside is dangerous, full of enemies who would finish what they started." "Some places are dangerous," Maya agreed.
"But not all of them.
There are worlds where people would welcome them just because they're young and curious and full of potential." Through her bond with Corvain, she projected images of the places they had visited: the peaceful gardens of the Solani, the reconstructed cities of Kepler's Hope, the research stations where beings of dozens of species worked together to unlock the universe's mysteries. The children watched these visions with hungry eyes, but it was the adults who provided the real surprise. Many of them were staring at the images with expressions Maya had not seen before on Morgoth faces: wonder. "I remember when I used to dream like that," whispered an elderly engineer, his voice barely audible. "Before the wars. Before we learned that the universe hated us."
"The universe doesn't hate anyone," Maya said gently. "It's too big to hate. But it's also big enough for everyone to find their place in it."
Over the following days, Maya and Corvain's presence began to work a subtle transformation throughout Vendetta Station. The change was not dramatic or sudden, but it was unmistakable.
Warriors who had spent decades planning revenge found themselves discussing what they might do instead. Engineers began designing tools for construction rather than destruction. And, throughout the station, people started asking questions they had not dared voice in generations. What if there was another way to live?
The breakthrough came when Valterra approached Maya with a request that would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. The war speaker's cybernetic implants had been removed, revealing a face that was younger and more vulnerable than Maya had expected. "The children you spoke of," she said hesitantly.
"The ones who would welcome our young ones. Could you arrange such a meeting?" Maya smiled, feeling Corvain's warm approval through their bond. "I know just the place." The journey that followed would become one of the most celebrated events in galactic history.
A convoy of ships left the shattered worlds carrying not weapons or threats, but refugees seeking not revenge but redemption. They traveled to New Geneva, a peaceful world where human colonists had established a society based on radical inclusiveness. The first meeting between Morgoth children and human children was awkward and tentative, filled with cultural misunderstandings and language barriers. But children have a remarkable ability to see past differences to the common core of childhood itself. Within hours, young beings who were supposed to be natural enemies were playing together and teaching each other games. The adult Morgoth watched these interactions with emotions too complex for words. For the first time in centuries, they began to believe that their children might have a future that was not defined by their past. News of the successful integration spread throughout the shattered worlds like wildfire. Other habitats began sending their own delegations, tentatively exploring possibilities they had not dared consider.
The process was slow and sometimes painful, but it had begun.
As Maya and Corvain prepared to continue their journey, Admiral Kestrel approached them with a question that had been troubling him for months.
"How do you do it?" he asked.
"How do you take beings who have been shaped entirely by violence and hatred and help them find another way?"
Maya considered the question carefully, scratching behind Corvain's ears as she thought.
"I think," she said finally, "most beings aren't really violent by nature.
They're just scared and hurt and lonely.
Once you help them feel safe and connected again, they remember who they were before the pain took over." Through their bond, Corvain shared his perspective on her words. The great wolf had experienced his own transformation from weapon to friend, and he understood better than anyone how healing could happen when someone cared enough to look past the surface to the wounded soul beneath. As they departed from the shattered worlds, Maya and Corvain left behind something that had not existed there for 1,000 years: hope. It was fragile and tentative, like a flower growing in a wasteland, but it was real. And, like all living things, it would grow stronger with time and care. Their ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying them toward new adventures and new friends they had yet to meet. Behind them, the galaxy slowly began to transform as species that had been enemies for millennia started to remember what it felt like to dream of something better than endless war.
Maya had been right from the beginning. Everyone could be friends if they just remembered how to try.
And, with each world they visited, each conflict they helped heal, that simple truth became a little more real for everyone who heard their story. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and Maya-chan and Corvain the apex wolf had appointed themselves to help everyone remember that friendship was the greatest wonder of all. Their journey was far from over, but they faced the future with confidence, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would meet them together. In a universe that had forgotten how to hope, an 8-year-old girl and her unlikely best friend had become living proof that even the most impossible things could happen when someone cared enough to make them real.